Welcome to People in Insurance. This podcast explores the mix of diversity, culture and tech innovations in our industry. Join us as we sit down with trailblazers, thought leaders and innovators who are reshaping the landscape of insurance, bringing you stories that redefine the narrative. We are your guide to the evolving landscape of insurance. This is People in Insurance, brought to you by Mackay. Good morning, Suneeta. I am really grateful to have you on Changing the Conversation because I thoroughly resonate with your journey and would like to hear more about it. So do you want to give us an overview about who you are, who PADDA Consulting are, and I'm just going to add on congratulations for the recent award that you've won, which is the London Market Consultant Advisory Service Award. So well done.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me. So who am I? So Suneeta Padda. I have, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but... I
mean, I'm a chronic oversharer, so please feel free.
Okay, then I will overshare. So I actually wanted to be a chef. I wanted to be a chef when I was when I'd left school. I went to the Birmingham College of Food and Domestic Arts, and I actually walked away with a distinction and a job offer to go and work at the Savoy. So in case you haven't picked up on the slight twang in my accent, I'm a Brummie. I won't go into Brummie mode, I promise. But my parents had other ideas. So my marriage was arranged at the age of 19, which brought me to London. So when I was in London, I lived with my husband, his three sisters, his mum and his dad, and I didn't study and I didn't really work. I worked within the family businesses on and off over a few years, had two lovely children at the age of 24 and 25, and then I got divorced when I was 31. Found myself on my own, and coming from that arranged marriage environment means you are definitely on your own, because you're now an outcast, and because my husband and I didn't have a house together, it meant that you had no assets to start again at the age of 31. And I then took lots of advice from Women's Refuge, the New and Black Sisters, and lots of other organisations, and managed to find a place, rent a place, get a student grant, and went to university. So I did a degree in business and marketing, part-time, over 5 years with two young children. And at that very time, my parents, who had retired and gone back to India, weren't very well. They came back. They lived with me during that period as well. My mum died a year before I finished my degree, and my dad died the year after I'd just finished my degree. And then I was now this 36-year-old student, single mum, whatever you want to label me as, looking for a job, and who was going to employ me? So I was knocking on lots and lots of different doors, but fortunate for me, I would say, not. The FSA was just being formed. All the former regulatory bodies were coming together, and there was a need for a lot of resource. So I joined as a temp. And when I started as a temp, I was, short of money. It was very strict with time because childcare wasn't an option. And I was able to progress at the FSA. And it was some great people. Fiona King, in particular, was a really good mentor and somebody who had opened that door for me initially. She offered me my 6-month contract, and then I went to work in the banking division, and I worked for a guy called Gavin Stewart. He was the tallest man I'd ever encountered, and then I later realised it was because he was a former Olympic rower. So that was great working with him, got to learn a lot about rowing. And having worked there for a few years, in 2005, new regulation came out and it was hitting the insurance sector. And I then went to work at Marsh and then progressed up the ladder there. Then I became the International Compliance Director at Willis. Then I was the Global Head of Compliance at HSBC Insurance Brokers. And then I was the Head of UK Compliance at Amlin. And after that, my ex-husband passed away quite suddenly at the age of 45, which September the 19th, 2011. that week on the Friday. That was the Monday, so I can't really do the maths, not my strong subject. But on that Friday, I walked into Amlin and resigned. I think everyone thought I'd lost the plot, but I knew that life was too short. It still is too short, and I wanted to do something different, and I would rather try something and fail at it, which was never going to happen, or I was going to do something different and not have any regrets as I got older. And that's how the concept of PADDA Consulting first developed. And June 2012, that's when I set up the company. And then Howden Insurance Brokers, when they were in Eastcheap, were my first ever client. So there you go, a very long-winded way of telling you about Suneeta Padda and how PADDA Consulting was formed.
But what an incredible story, with its own challenges, opportunities, really difficult times, and sort of the resilience, I suppose, that's needed to overcome that. What an incredible story. So many questions coming off the back of that. So you started PADDA Consulting. What was the first few years like, given, you know, what you'd left, big corporates, your life experiences? What was the first few years like?
And that's a really good question, because I don't think a lot of people talk about the downsides of running a business. So I think being a single mum, had just bought this, what do they call it? The worst house in the best street. And it was the project house. I'd bought it with somebody I was in a relationship with, and that was my last ever relationship, because that ended. I bought him out. So I'm actually giving up a 6-figure salary job in 2012 to keep this house, to buy somebody out of a house, and still 2 children at home, to set up my own business. Now, looking back, was that a crazy thing to do? If somebody else was doing that and I was asked to advise them, I'd have said exactly what everybody around me was saying. You've lost the plot. But I'm quite stubborn, and once I set my mind on something, it's a challenge, and I will get through this. Because, as I said, failing was not an option. And I can remember the first 18 months was going really, really well. And then I hit the 2-year mark, and it wasn't going so well. You know, I didn't have a network. I didn't know where the money was going to come from. There was no cash flow in the business. There was nothing. And it was like, well, do I give up now or do I carry on? So I read a book about the 2 women who set up Not on the High Street. And apparently 2 years is the mark where most businesses fail. And you either sink or you swim. So I chose to swim. So I phoned up my niece, who I'm really close to, who actually does work with me as well now.
Oh, lovely.
And I also phoned up a really good friend of mine, and I said to each one of them, I need some money for 2 months and I will pay you back. And they lent me some money, and because that's what it said in this book. It said, see if some friends or family are prepared to lend you some money to get through this period. So now I've got myself even further into debt, but I paid them back. And yeah, I worked even harder. And I think this is where a lot of people will say, you can't detach yourself from work. You love your work. Yes, I love my work. I wish I could detach myself from it. But something inside of me says you have to keep working hard and harder and harder. You can't take your finger off that pulse, because if you do, it's not like I can pull a sickie or I can take 2 weeks holiday whenever I want to. Even though I'm in charge of my own life, I also now have a responsibility to 14 other people who work with me. So I feel like I've got an even bigger family I need to look after. So that sense of responsibility and that resilience and that hard work and never giving up just keeps me going.
How do you think your experiences training to be a chef, not being able to fulfill that career opportunity at the Savoy, how do you think that has developed you into being somebody who is so resilient and has such a strength of character to face these challenges and go, failure's not an option?
I think the resilience comes much earlier in my life. The resilience comes from being the 6th child in a working class family, first immigrants coming over from India, sixth child but the fourth daughter of an Asian family. I'll let anyone else do some research into that. But I always wanted to be seen because I needed to be a perfectionist. I needed to show my parents I could achieve something. I could cook at the age of 9. I could be left with responsibility at the age of 10. And I think that resilience comes from before I was even 10 years old. And the resilience comes from our culture and how women in our culture are brought up. And we're made to feel that we were second-class citizens, that we couldn't achieve. Our life was planned for us. Decisions were made for us. But the resilience comes because you feel like you have to fight a lot of battles even before you even enter the workplace.
Wow. How was that? Because, I mean, you're involved in quite a lot of diversity and inclusion areas, across the insurance industry and compliance. How's that kind of developed? How important is it, and what are you seeing as time is moving on in that area?
It's really important. I think that there are two different aspects. There's diversity and there is inclusion. So if we talk about diversity, as an insurance market, we are looking to bring in diverse individuals from different social backgrounds, different cultures, to make our market representative of what society is as a whole. But the challenges are not everybody comes from the same place. And I talked about my arranged marriage, 1986, seems like, when dinosaurs were around. But it still happens in some cultures. And there have been some young girls in our insurance market who are very academically were really good, come from really underprivileged backgrounds and worked really, really hard to get to that point. And then having to face that prospect of an arranged marriage and give up work, that still happens in our market. And those young girls feel they can't talk to just anyone. And I get that. I get the fact that you have to have the self that you are at home and the self that you are for when I was at school or when I was first started working. I suppose that still happens. People still have to live this kind of dual role in life. It's like I'll have to be what my family want me to be at home, and I have to be what people at work want me to be. But actually, who am I? Who is this person, Suneeta? Am I the person fighting the things that I've always wanted to achieve and do and not being allowed to do? Or is there more to me than that? I'm going to be 58 soon and I'm still discovering that. And I want to discover me before it's too late. So I'm helping people who are coming into our insurance market and broader afield with those aspects of that integration into the workplace. And it's okay to be yourself. How much of your whole self can you really bring to work? So I talk to a lot of people. So that's one aspect, the diversity piece and different people we bring in. And whilst we've got this one road, they all come from lots of different roads, and some from very small country lanes and some from great big dual carriageways, but it doesn't matter. We all come from a different road, but we're leading to this one destination. So once we get there, the next problem is inclusion. Because whilst as a market we are driving this diversity and inclusion, if every day of the week I have to go into a company and work there and I am the only brown Asian woman there, how is that going to make me feel? Because now I don't feel included. So as a market we're diverse, but as separate organisations we're not. So there's still more to do in that space.
I had a really interesting conversation with somebody a few months ago now, and it was on a podcast, and she was talking about how her cultural differences made it difficult to be assertive in the workplace, where you might, one person with a particular culture might be absolutely happy critiquing something or being assertive and saying, actually, I'm going to push back on that, or asking for the pay rise or that. How have you seen that over your career from different cultures?
I can speak from my culture, because I remember when I was at the FSA, and when one of my managers sat me down and gave me some feedback. I mean, the first thing, entering the workplace and you've got people older than you and you feel, I have to respect them and they know what's right. Then you've got, they're older than you and they're white. Then you've got, they're older than you and they're white men. Then you've got, that you're addressing people by their first names. So you've got all of these challenges when you walk into the workplace. So it was no surprise when my first manager gave me some feedback and he said, you are allowed to challenge. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, if I said the sky was pink, you are allowed to disagree with me and explain why you would say it's not pink, it's blue and it's white, and this is why. So that aspect of challenge, that one meeting resulted in me getting regular feedback from people, because I needed to grow as a person because my starting point was completely different to others. I wasn't allowed to be a rebellious teenager. I wasn't allowed to go out to parties or pubs. Trust me, I've made up for it since then. But you weren't allowed to do those things. But it's so the challenge bit and that respect bit and respecting people who are older than you. And I can remember growing up, my mum and dad, they never celebrated Christmas. This was back in the 70s. But they'd befriended lots of elderly couples on our street. And every Christmas we would be taking gifts round to them, because my mum and dad knew. And I can remember it used to be a box of milk tray and a bottle of sherry. And I can't stand either one of those now. But we used to have to go and drop that off. So it was almost seen that they wanted to appease people. Well, all of that inherently starts moulding and shaping you from a very young age. But the other thing then, because I've talked about playing this dual role, we feel like we're being deceitful when we're being somebody else in different places. We can never be our true selves. A lot of women of my age, from the same cultural background, we carry a lot of guilt around with us. We just feel guilty about things that we shouldn't even feel guilty about. And sometimes we do something and we feel that feeling of guilt when actually there's nothing to be guilty about. So that's a strange one that I've got to get to the bottom of yet.
It's a really difficult one. And I think I can certainly apply that to myself, being a working mum. And I, different cultures such as yours, I think that's you've got even more different connotations about, if you're brought up in a way that the home is where you should be, and you've got a very successful business. How have you kind of married those two things in yourself to go, I am a good mum and I am a good professional and I can do both?
Well, I think the mum bit for me, I was bringing my kids up whilst I was studying. I was studying part-time, even though I was taking my mum and dad to and forth to hospital appointments. And we never really went on holiday because we didn't have the money to do that. So I was around a lot more. So I think it is a real challenge for women who hold down a very successful career and they have children, and they struggle with that. If I'm giving work 100% and I'm not home, I feel guilty. If I'm at home and I'm not giving work 100%, I feel guilty. It's just something that we carry around with us. But I think as I've grown older, it's been easier for me with managing the kids. Well, I say easier, it comes with lots of challenges. But now my kids are much older and they're in their 30s. And whilst the culture was pushed on me when I was younger, I embrace my culture now. I love it. I think, it is a big part of who I am. And, I've done some research into where my mum and dad lived in India, and I've been back, I've visited there, and what my dad did. He was a fireman in the army, and what he did during the partition, and reading all about what they had done in their lives. And having lost them in my early 30s, I think it's helped me embrace my culture a little bit more. I think even with my kids, culture is important. I think that family, a business built on the principles of a good family values, that's what we're about. So I said to you, my niece works with us, so does my son, so does my daughter, so does a number of really good friends. And we do work like a family.
Do you know, I cannot tell you how much I love that, because I think today for me is encompassing family values. So I'm interviewing today, and I'm really grateful that you've come down, and I've done 3 interviews today. I've brought my daughter to work, and every single person I've spoken to has had their story about why family values are so important and how they're embracing it in their career. So I absolutely love that seems to be much more prevalent now than it perhaps was.
Yeah, is it prevalent? Has it always been there? Do we try and hide it because it doesn't make us look as professional? Or is it how other people will perceive us? Is it prevalent because we're getting to learn that life is really precious? It is really short? Or is it COVID that brought lots of families together and also tore a lot of other people apart, but brought families together that has really taught people retaught those values?
I think, for me, COVID was an eye-opener, because you Zoom meetings and you've got kids around. I remember doing a podcast over Zoom and my son running in and shooting me between the eyes with a Nerf bullet. I can't remember if I edited the expletives or that particular thing out of the podcast. I probably did. But it actually made me belly laugh, because it made me think, this is real life. This is actually real life. And I've never really had a divide between life and work. Like, people talk about work-life balance. It's the same for me. And I don't seem to be able to compartmentalize any of it. But both a blessing and a curse. But it really, that feels much more prevalent in the conversations I'm having, in the cultures that businesses are trying to foster. And I think it's a really good thing. Where do you think we're going to go, over the next 5 years, the work you're doing on diversity and inclusion? What would you like to see more of? What initiatives are you involved in?
So one of the initiatives that I'm involved in is called RATTLE, Race Action Through Leadership. It's about, and Robin Arfi, who's the CRO at Beazley, is the chair of that committee. And what we're looking to do is bring the leaders of the insurance industry together. So it's only open to CEOs and chairs, because it's about having an open, honest conversation with that community to understand their specific challenges, so that as we move forward, we foster a culture and an environment that is moving at the same pace. It's not about a competition that one firm is doing better than another. It's about learning from each other to say, well, where has somebody, what has somebody done that's actually helped them improve diversity and inclusion within our market? And it's about measuring what diversity, that's an interesting one for me, is we're putting the measures in around how many people we onboard, but it's around, well, how many people don't stay? What's the attrition rate there? And the reason I say that is because diversity without inclusion would naturally lead to a high attrition rate. Because if you don't feel included somewhere, why would you want to stay? So I think we still have work to do. I think we're making progress, but I think we've been saying that for 20 odd years. But I think, excuse me, I think diversity and inclusion is a very interesting area. And I think it's an area that, we should still all keep working towards, not pushing. It's not a journey. It's not something, all right, when we've got to, every organisation has 10 diverse individual. It's about progression, and it's about making sure that firms identify that your recruitment policies, so if you're fishing from a diverse pool, I feel that you go through the right process, but actually it's the white male that is the better suited for that role, then that role should absolutely go to that person, because it's diversity and inclusion plus meritocracy. I would not want a job because I'm an Asian woman. I would want the job because I'm the best for that job.
I think that's really important, really, really important. Just before I hand you over to discuss this with co-host Isabel today, these are really important issues. There's movements happening in the insurance industry. Are there any new projects or initiatives or things that you are excited about that you want to share with the listeners about this journey, or about what they can do to support the insurance industry, diversity, inclusion, businesses, and making sure that the right person is chosen?
I think the one thing that I would say is that there are a lot of communities now out there. There's, Ladies at Lunch, there's ICANN, IWIN. There's a lot of organisations that are pulling together communities. I think people should understand that that's open to everyone. It's not limited to the diverse population within your respective organisation. I would encourage everyone to go to those events, to learn more broadly about the challenges and the culture. It's a bit like, if we have a women's event, that's great. We're saying we lack diversity in our market. We need to change the tone from the top. So let's think about that if we want to change that and start moving the dial on that, if we're organising a women's event, then why it shouldn't be exclusive to women? Because if the people who need to be listening and the ones that are going to be pivotal to that change are the, men, or largely dominated boards by, males, if they're the decision makers, then we should be inviting everybody, because everybody needs to hear where the challenges are and where the pain points are, because how else are you going to fix it? So I just think that we just need to start opening our minds, broadening these communities, broadening these events, to actually open them up to everybody so that we can educate people along the way.
I think that is really well articulated, because often by default of being a diverse group, things that are put in place are then very much restricted to that diverse group, which is almost preaching to the converted. That's not, it's not bringing diversity in, it's just segmenting people in a different way. So I think this bringing everyone together is really important. I'm really grateful to you for your time today. I'd love just to hand over to my co-host Isabel, for her to ask you a couple of questions. Feel free to ask her any questions as well. Isabel.
Thank you, Sarah.
So hi. I was wondering what your work-life balance was. Was it hard, managing your kids as well as starting your own business in the early stages?
That's a really good question. It was hard. I think it was harder when I was looking after the period where I juggled the most was looking after a sick mum and dad, 2 young children, and do my degree, because I had to study and do all my assignments. And one of the ways that I found an efficient way of revising was I used to put key notes. I used to study maybe from about 10 o'clock till about 2-3 in the morning, and then be up to do the school run. But I used to write keynotes on post-it notes, and they used to be all over the house, in the loo, down the stairs, in my bedroom, in the lounge.
That's smart.
That is smart, isn't it? Because if you can see it every day, you're learning it every day. And if I could, when I was sitting those exams, I'd think, where was that subject? I know that was above the mirror, down the hallway. Yes, and I could actually then picture the notes.
Yeah. I was also wondering, how long did it take you to like start up your business and start like getting employees to come in and do stuff?
Good. That's a good question as well. So first it was just me, and I was doing it on my own for about the first 18 months or so. And then a really good friend of mine, he'd gone through some difficult times, and him and his wife decided that they were going to have a change in life as well. And she left the city to go and do something different. And he came on board and he started to work with me. And then from then, it just built one by one. And after that was another interesting one, was a woman who had a baby later on in life, and was being asked to come back to the city, but was being told she would have to travel lots and go to lots of different European countries. And it wasn't going, she wanted to be at home with her baby, who was now a year old. And so she came, and I met her for a drink when she had one of her keeping in touch days. And just for your benefit, a keeping in touch day is when somebody is on maternity leave and they have 2 or 3 days before they start coming back to work to come and keep in touch with their old teams and people. So she came in for one of those, and there was a group of us that met up for drinks. And I just said to her after these drinks, why don't you come and work with me? And she took me up on it, and she's been working with me for about nearly 10 years.
Wow, that's impressive. So you talked how long it took you to start up your business, but what was it like?
Lonely. It's very lonely when you set up your own business, because when you go into an office, you see lots of people. You see a security guard, you see the receptionist, you go in, you see your team, you meet other teams. And when you're working on your own and setting up a business, it is very, very lonely. And so the one bit of advice that I would give to people is that make sure that you connect with lots of other people, that you can then form your own little community of other people who have set up their own businesses, so that you've got each other, because it is a very lonely place.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking with me.
And what is it that you want to do, Isabel?
I really want to start my own business in like my 20s or whatever. I want to keep doing that, and then I want to be able to go make passive income and start travelling in my 30s, and I want to be able to like travel the world.
And you will do that. And what is it, your business, that you want to do?
I am not sure. I've done a couple like businesses. My best one was during lockdown. I made over £300 and I donated over £100 to charity on top of the £300.
Wow.
It was selling T-shirts on Facebook Marketplace.
So get yourself something that you're passionate about, because you've got to love it. It sounds like I'm saying, I love compliance. Well, I do. But find something that you love, turn that into your business, set yourself some clear objectives. And by that, I mean, what every 6 months, what are the key things that you want to do and what you want to achieve?
So, like, write them down.
Write them down.
Yeah.
Post-it notes all around the house so your mum can get mad at you. Yeah. So you can see them and you can believe it, and then you start writing down, where is it you want to start travelling? When do you want to start travelling? And you know that phrase, seeing is believing?
Yeah.
You see it, you will believe it, and it will happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking with me.
And thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to another enlightening episode of People in Insurance. If you enjoyed today's insights and want to stay connected with the latest industry trends, be sure to subscribe, rate and leave a review. Feel free to reach out to us on social media or through our website to share your thoughts and suggestions, or even to nominate someone whose contribution deserves to be heard. Until next time, signing off from People in Insurance.